Hello and welcome to the 722nd edition of the Enfield Microphone, Dateline, the 20th of April, 1989. On this occasion, your readers are...
John.
And?
Alec.
And me, Alf, with Peter on the controls, back again from his trip down under, where, as we told you previously, he's been working on the maintenance of the Flying Scotsman. We hope to carry a report from him in a future edition.
Good day.
And for the roundup of news, we have a full tape of interesting articles this week, including how two Enfield schoolboys were saved at the soccer disaster by a change of mind, and weapons stolen from Enfield scouts, plus all news and views from around the borough. Without further ado, over to John.
Thanks, Alf. Our lead story, of course, must be the one which is headlined, Saved by a Change of Mind. A last-minute change of mind probably saved the lives of two teenage football fans. Enfield schoolboys Tim Cunningham and Ian Dargaville should have been standing on the Hillsborough terraces where 95 people died in Saturday's tragedy. But as they travelled up to the semi-final between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest, they decided on impulse to swap their standing tickets for seats in the stand. Tim, 15 of Church Street, Winchmore Hill, and Ian, 15 of Hadley Road, Enfield, spoke about their great escape and about an outing which turned into a nightmare. The boys, who are avid Liverpool supporters, get tickets for most matches and usually stand behind the goal where they can get the best view of the action. But on Saturday, their decision to use the seats which overlook the terraces saved them from injury or even death in the terrible tragedy. Unable to help and horrified at what had happened, Tim and Ian left the stadium and caught their train back to London. But while the boys were travelling back, their parents were desperately trying to find out whether they were safe. Margaret Cunningham, a widow, and her brother phoned the emergency line but could not get through. Eventually they contacted the hospitals in Sheffield and discovered there were 3 Cunninghams who had been omitted. "I was sure Tim was in the crowd. He always stands," Mrs. Cunningham said. "It was terrible." Although the boys had tried to telephone from Sheffield, they had not been able to get through, so it was not until hours later, when they reached Wood Green, that they were able to let their worried parents know they were safe. Tim and Ian, who are still shocked and horrified at what they saw, will be talking about their experiences at their school, Latimer, and hope to organise a collection for the appeal fund.
As already stated, lethal weapons have been stolen from the Ponders End Scouts headquarters in a raid which wrecked the building. The haul included 7 5-foot-long bows, 80 arrows, 2 air guns and ammunition. Leader of the 8th Enfield Scouts, Pam Bartrop, believes the metal-shafted 18-inch long arrows could kill someone. An arrow will go right through a target. If someone aimed at a person, it would go right through them. They can kill, she said. The Scout leaders have issued a plea for the dangerous weapons to be returned. If anyone sees anybody with these sort of weapons, please contact the police. You don't have to leave your name. It is the bows and arrows we are most worried about, as they are lethal in the wrong hands. We need to get them away from anyone who doesn't know how to use them, said Mrs. Bartrop. The thieves broke into the headquarters behind Ponders End Methodist Church in the early hours of Sunday morning. They forced their way through 3 locks to reach the guns, kept in a metal cupboard. They were very determined, said a police spokesman. They left £500 worth of damage behind them after ransacking the whole building. They smashed every single door and cupboard, said Mrs. Bartrop, as the Scouts cleared up the mess. The Scouts used the weapons, worth £500, for target practice and had worked hard organising fêtes, jumble sales and doing odd jobs to raise the money to buy them.
A champion greyhound will be put down this week unless a home can be found for it. The race is on to find a home for the dog called Spot This, who has had to retire from the track because of injury. He can no longer stay at the racing kennels, and his Southgate owners are unable to give him a home because of the family's pet cat. Owner Patricia Lindsay of Chaseway Southgate said, "We would love to keep him ourselves. He was our first greyhound and we have got very attached to him. But unfortunately we've got a 12-year-old cat called Pepsi, and the 2 of them just couldn't live in the same house. We've been told Spot This has got to leave his kennels in Ongar this week, and if we can't find a home for him, he will have to be put down." Spot This, described by Mrs. Lindsay as a very loving and affectionate dog, won more than 20 greyhound races at Walthamstow before injuring his paws. An operation got him back on the track for a time, but the injury persisted and he had to be retired. Mrs. Lindsay and her husband, Victor, are now desperately searching for a good home for the 4.5-year-old dog.
A 42-year-old Winchmore Hill man has been banned from driving for 1 year and fined £300 and £15 costs for failing to provide a specimen for a drink-drive test when he appeared at Hendon Magistrates Court last Tuesday. Norman Garside, a building manager for developers Costaines, pleaded guilty to failing to provide a breath test specimen on March the 13th at West Hendon Police Station. Charles Abbott, prosecuting, told the court that while police were dealing with a traffic accident on North Circular Road, Hendon, they heard skidding and saw a white Ford Granada hit the rear of a stationary vehicle and push it forward. The driver refused a roadside breath test and at the police station said, "I'm not supplying any specimen," said Mr. Abbott. The court heard that Garside refused to provide a specimen because he was angry at the police's heavy-handed approach. He was also worried about his car after being taken down to the police station because he left some money in it. He refused the test because of his angry mood. Garside of Rosenheath Avenue also denied refusing to give a specimen. He told police that he would take a blood test.
Residents are kicking up a stink about a fishy smell wafting into their homes. People living near the UOP plant at Brimsdown have complained to Councillor Bill Price. "We are subject to this smell all the time, and it's horrible," said Councillor Price. "Some people have told me that it makes them feel ill." Councillor Price contacted Enfield Environmental Health Department, who in turn contacted government pollution inspectors. Mr. Dave Simpson at Environmental Health said, "We have listened to complaints about this, although it's a matter for the pollution inspectorate. The smell comes from a process involving the chemical triamines, which does have a fishy odour. The inspectors are negotiating with UOP about it to see if something can be done about the smell." A spokesman for the company said, "We are working round the clock to find the cause of the annoyance. We have machinery in place which should lessen the smell, but it does not seem to be addressing the problem. We'll continue working to solve the problem."
A miracle cure for a plant disease threatening to wipe out Britain's roses has been discovered in a Waltham Cross laboratory. The breakthrough was made by one of the world's leading gardening experts, Dr. David Hessayan, and his team of scientists at Pan Britannica Industries in the High Street. The Royal National Rose Society is hailing cythane as its saviour after rose rust began decimating Britain's flower beds. But the cure to the fungal disease was discovered almost by accident. It was already being used to treat apple crops when it was decided to experiment on rose leaves. Dr. Hessian said, "You never know with these things. We gave it a try and it worked." Unlike other diseases, rose rust attacks the underside of the leaf until it drops off. The rose is then starved because it has nowhere to feed from. It's rather like putting sticky tape over your mouth. The product launch was to be delayed until 1990, while Pan Britannica waited for government approval. But the Rose Society was so concerned that gardeners were giving up on roses because of the disease that they made a personal plea to Mrs. Thatcher, and the government gave it priority clearance. Lieutenant Colonel Ken Grapes, Secretary of the Rose Society, said, "If this product had not been available immediately, gardeners might have been forced to throw away their roses and grow something else instead, and that would have been disastrous." Dr. Hessian says our cleaner air policy is partly to blame for the diseases attacking our foliage. He said, "In the old days, the sulphur in the air would act as a natural fungicide. Now we have cleaner air, but more disease for our plants. Cleaner air is not better for all of us." Cythane is available at most gardening centres.
Forty Hill Women's Institute members were surprised to hear that it costs £300 a week to maintain a hospital bed and that it needs £2,000 a year to cater for the first year of a kidney transplant. Mr. Alan Garrett was speaking about the League of Friends of Chase Farm, St Michael's, Highlands and Cheshunt hospitals at the club's April meeting. Members heard how the Friends idea originated before the National Health Service. Today, the Friends take over where official sources leave off, from bedpans to scanners and knitting groups to coach outings. The Enfield and Cheshunt League was formed in 1953, and in 1956 the first T-bar was installed at Chase Farm. T-bars have now been extended to other sections of the hospital. Mr. Garrett told members that it cost the Friends £3,000 to provide curtains for one ward. The League also supplies protection screens for staff, induction systems, hearing aids for patients and other extras.
Now to small news items. Enfield-based office equipment firm Copymore has acquired a local company which should soon be moving in near Copymore's Great Cambridge Road office block. Copymore has bought Wood Green-based Victor Office Equipment. All existing staff of the company will be retained. Geoffrey Godbold, Joint Managing Director of Copymore plc, commented, "The acquisition will enlarge our business areas and adds considerable expertise in the office furniture market." And a retired Southgate teacher, Leslie Palin, has won the Ian Fraser Memorial Prize for Fine Art at Middlesex Polytechnic. The £100 prize is awarded annually in memory of the late Ian Fraser, former head of BA Fine Art at the Polytechnic. Leslie, an associate student at the Polytechnic, won the prize with a drawing of a young girl reading. He was head of science at Arnold School, now Brookford School, until 1980.
Roy Hay of Bull Cross, Enfield, will plant a giant redwood tree sapling at Capel Manor Horticultural Centre, Bullsmore Lane, Enfield, at 11:30am on Thursday, April 27th. The tree, presented by the Britain in Bloom Committee, will commemorate Roy Hay's retirement after 23 years as chairman of the National Britain in Bloom competition.
Parts of the Highlands Hospital development will look like the Berlin Wall, councillors heard last Tuesday. At a meeting of the Planning and Transportation Committee, Councillor John Lindsay said, "I have to take issue on the block down World's End Lane. I would describe it as like a Berlin Wall all the way down the lane. It would be a retrograde step and not the sort of thing we should approve just like that." But Borough Planning Officer Martin Jewell argued that the block would be of a design which drops down the hill. It provides quite a pleasing frontage to World's End Lane, he said. Councillors also discussed the danger to wildlife on the site once building of the phased development gets underway. Councillor Richard Corse demanded protection for badgers. "I know there are badger sets all over that site. I would like there to be a condition that the developers search the site for sets before starting work and don't break the law by disturbing them. You can't go charging through a badger set with a JCB." Mr. Corse said he feared the council might find itself in the legal position of having to demand closure of the hospital so that building could go ahead. Mr. Jewell replied that protection of the badgers was assured by the Wildlife and Countryside Act and added, "The question of closure is a matter between the Health Authority and Chase Farm Hospital. The legal arguments exist to ensure the phasing of the development," he said. Councillors approved conditional outline planning permission and demolition work connected with the development.
Police are investigating a series of knife-point robberies and off-licences in Ordnance Road, Enfield. Off-licence manager Mr. Narottam Ashar had to hold a door shut with his wife's help to protect himself and his family as a raider tried to force his way through in the second armed robbery on his shop that week. "I'm so frightened for myself and my family," Mr. Ashar of Shilpa Wines in Ordnance Road said after the attack on Saturday night. The raider was wearing a balaclava and holding a 5-inch bladed knife. He went back to the shop where he hurled the cash till onto the ground and stole £800. Last Monday, around about the same time at 9:45pm, Mr. Ashar had been held at knife point and £300 was stolen. Another off-licence in the same road was also robbed at knife point last Thursday at 10:20pm when a masked man emptied the till of £100 after threatening Collison off-licence shop assistant Stephen Farrington with a 6-inch kitchen knife held to his throat.
A losing battle to keep an injured deer alive was fought over the weekend. The tiny muntjac deer was brought to the former park ranger Dennis Ashcroft's Enfield home after getting stuck in a 5-bar gate. Dennis is a deer expert and planned to nurse the animal back to health and release it into the wild. When he took it to the vet, X-rays revealed it was pregnant and about to give birth. Said Dennis, "The deer was brought to me after being discovered in Potter's Bar. She had cuts on her, and I took her to the vet. On Sunday I went to the pen in my garden, but she was dead. It looks like it was shock that carried her off. Deer are sensitive creatures. It's a real shame. There was nothing that could have been done." Muntjac deer have been spotted in Enfield, and Dennis believes there are nearly 100 living in a small area of cockfosters. They have also been spotted at Arnold House, the Ridgeway, Enfield.
2 schoolboys armed with a penknife tried to rob a 50-year-old man in an alley last Sunday afternoon. The boys, aged about 12, pulled out a knife in the alleyway behind Bowood Road, Enfield. The victim struck out at the boys and they ran off. And 2 Edmonton men, arrested in possession of tools to be used in the theft of bicycle lights, were both conditionally discharged for a year at Wood Green Crown Court on Thursday. Sean Brown, aged 18, a salesman of Bounce Road, and David Ruskin, aged 22, unemployed, of Salisbury Road, pleaded guilty to going equipped for theft in Gilder Avenue, Enfield, on September 5th last year.
Father and son may soon be pitting their wits against each other in the South East Regional Scrabble Finals later this month. The competition has become an annual ritual for Alan and Harvey Freeman of Ridings Avenue, Winchmore Hill. They have been reaching this stage of the competition for over 10 years. Harvey, aged 23, has twice come close to winning the grand finals, achieving second place in 1980 and third place in 1985. A trainee accountant, he has been playing since the age of 6 when his father taught him, and now plays regularly in the London Scrabble League. The regional finals will be held at Baden-Powell House, Queensgate, London, on Sunday, April 23rd. Contestants will each play 3 games against different opponents, attempting to gain the highest aggregate scores of the day. The champion receives a Royal Doulton vase and a leather-bound gold-block Chambers Dictionary. The top 10 will go forward to the grand finals of the National Scrabble Championship being held in the new Connaught Rooms in London on June the 25th.
Thanks, Alec. Of course, Harvey Freeman is our own Harvey Freeman, a reader, of course, of the newspaper. Well done, Harvey, and I hope you get success. Royal Ordnance has been fined the maximum £2,000 after a 165-kilo metal lid exploded during the production of an explosive and destroyed the roof of the company's Research and Development Centre. The blast at the Waltham Abbey site on January the 5th sent debris flying and toxic nitrous fumes spread over the surrounding area, Epping magistrates heard last Friday. 8 employees were taken to hospital after inhaling the toxic fumes but were not detained, and 2 employees were treated for cuts and bruises. Royal Ordnance, a subsidiary of British Aerospace, admitted contravening the 1924 Health and Safety at Work Act by failing to ensure the safety of employees. The court heard that the explosion was caused by an overheated vessel. The company's chemical engineer had sanctioned the use of the vessel, providing its lid was closed to prevent fumes escaping but not clamped. On the day of the accident, 2 men responsible for safety weren't on site, and a scientist in charge took over and shut the cover. Insufficient ventilation meant there was no way of slowing down the reaction, which began to occur when the vessel's contents reached 70 degrees centigrade. The building was evacuated and the explosion happened soon afterwards. Prosecution for the Health and Safety Executive, Stephen Thirsk, said the possible risks and dangers were known to the company. They should have had far more stringent safety procedures. Edward Jenkins, defending, said the company had lost the £150,000 order from the United States military that it was working on at the time as a direct result of the explosion. Royal Ordnance escaped an unlimited fine in the Crown Court because the case didn't involve members of the public. They were also ordered to pay £571 costs.
Council officers and Tory councillors have united to condemn a report which labels Enfield schools as inefficient. The report, which appeared in the Education and Training UK 1989, placed the borough 56 out of 67 inefficient education authorities. It claimed Enfield did not provide value for money compared with efficient authorities like Harrow, Brent and Sunderland. But the council's head of secondary schools, Keith Hardwich, said the method that has been used in producing this report remains a mystery. The figures used were those from 1944, a year when exam results were lower than they have been for the past 4 years, he said. They picked a bad year for Enfield. Our cost-effectiveness in terms of percentage exam pass rate has improved since then, he claimed. And Chairman of the Education Committee, Councillor Peter Elvidge, also attacked the report. It's very misleading because we are in fact very efficient as far as education is concerned and get good value for money, he said. The Education Committee condemned a report last year which placed Enfield as the lowest spending education authority. Their revised figures raised the borough to 6th from bottom.
150 years after Robert Cooper Lee Bevan founded Christchurch, his great-great-great-grandchildren returned to celebrate his achievement. His 3 descendants travelled to the building in Chalk Lane, Cockfosters, to join parishioners in the anniversary celebrations. The Bishop of London, Graham Leonard, Southgate MP, Mr. Michael Portillo, and Enfield's Mayor and Mayoress were all present, and more than 350 people turned up for the event, with many former parishioners travelling long distances from their present homes.
Enfield pigeons are once again in the news. Pigeon pests roosting in the roof of Edmonton Green Shopping Centre are creating a health hazard by fouling on food in the market stalls below. And environmental health chiefs are now recommending a new £13,700 scheme to combat the problem after angry stallholders said enough is enough. Of all the complaints we have from management in the shopping centre, this is the most frequent, said a council spokesman from the Borough Valuers Department. All past attempts to foil the fouling pigeons have failed. We've been grappling with pigeon problems in Enfield for the last 10 years, he explained. The pigeons have come even earlier this year because of the mild winter. Deterrents used in the past have included anti-pigeon gel on the pipework and a plastic hawk to scare the birds away, but both failed. And plastic netting has been forbidden because of the fire hazard. Environmental health officers are now hoping to introduce wire prongs to stop pigeons nesting in the roof of the covered market. We are aware the pigeons could move elsewhere, but they would not be as much of a problem because of the food involved, said the Borough Valuer.
Scotland Yard's Blue Berets foiled an attempted robbery by an armed gang after staking out an Enfield house. Police received a tip-off that the home of a car dealer in Turkey Street, Enfield, would be the scene of an armed robbery. Officers from the PT-17 branch of Scotland Yard were deployed to lie in wait for the gang while the occupier, who knew nothing of the planned robbery, was taken to a nearby building. At this point, the Blue Berets sprung out from their observation points and, after a brief struggle, disarmed the man. The car dealer was so shocked by the attempted robbery that he collapsed at work the next day, but has since recovered. At 9:30 p.m. on April the 12th, 4 men drove up in a convertible Mini, which they parked in Ascot Gardens. One of the men got out of the car and approached the door armed with a knife and an iron bar. 2 men have been charged with conspiracy to rob in connection with the incident. Christopher Hickley, 18, of Chingford, and Adrian Silver, 18, of Walthamstow, will appear before Enfield magistrates on May the 8th. One of the Blue Berets who took part in the successful operation at Enfield was shot in the foot the next day when the PT-17 branch based at Lippets Hill were involved in a shootout at a post office in Harrow.
Got some short news items. 2 boys aged 12 or 13 tried to rob a 50-year-old man on Sunday. "Give us your money or I'll cut you," one of them said to him in Bowood Road at midday. He clipped one of them round the ear hole and the 2 fled. Pupils at the Young School of Dancing in St Andrews Road, Enfield, raised £230 with their Let's Us Dance For You show for parents and friends at Chase Mixed School. The money will go to the children's ward at Enfield's Chase Farm Hospital. And finally, Southgate's Royal British Legion is anxious to trace any founder members, especially any First World War veterans, as the Legion records were destroyed during the 1939-45 war. Veterans will receive an invitation to a reunion on Saturday, May the 6th, and a Thanksgiving service on May the 7th by writing to the chairman, Mr. Marchant. The Royal British Legion, Southgate, the Hollies Hall, Nursery Road, Southgate, N14 4QQ.
A fire broke out in the tracks at Arnott's Grove Tube Station on Monday. Rush hour commuters were delayed for 20 minutes, and firemen were called to deal with the emergency. By the time they'd arrived, the small fire had burnt itself out.
That brings us to the halfway stage in our programme. Don't forget now to stop your machine, turn over the cassette, so that you can hear the rest of the tape. We'll meet you again on side 2.